You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. So the White Sox surprised us on opening day.
A little bit.
You know, I have at least 5 people that at some point during opening day or the following day reached out via text. I was on the phone with them. My 9-year-old did it. Said, so how much did they lose by? And I'm like, they won.
They won 8-1. They won by a lot.
My dad didn't watch the game because he finds this whole new thing just ridiculous with this network. Like, he's like, do I really want to pay and get an app? And, you know, he's trying to get the antenna working. I keep going over there trying to help him with the thing. And so he didn't even watch the game. He's like, he didn't even watch opening day. So then he's on the phone with me. He's like, how bad are they getting beat? I'm like, they're winning. Goes, what? They're winning. And the 9-year-old walks out today and he's like, how bad did the White Sox do yesterday? I'm like, they won. He goes, no, they didn't. I'm like, yeah, they won 8-1. So it just, there's incredulousness amongst White Sox fans as we sit here right now. I don't know, by the time that you've watched this episode, this will probably not be true, but they're currently undefeated and on a 162-0 pace. And,
above 500 for the first time since opening day 2023.
And they're having fun. I mean, what the heck?
Yeah.
And they doused Will Venable with every fluid they could find in the locker room, if you've seen that video.
You might want to rephrase
I'm not rephrasing it. I'm not exactly sure what was flying at Will Venable at that moment. There's a lot on that screen, so I'm just going to say it that way. He was a
happy manager, though. He was a happy manager.
He was a happy manager. Andrew Vaughn got to do something at least after the game because he's the only guy that didn't collect a hit of the starters, but he got to push him around the cart. So he contributed as well.
Andrew Vaughn didn't do anything in the game, I don't think, except for catch outs at first base from the infield because Sean Burke was
amazing.
He was incredibly efficient. That my favorite part of opening day was having a number one starter on the staff who could have gone beyond 6 innings because he finished the game with like 78 pitches only.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that something I always yell about? Like we can't get a guy to 6 innings. We can't get the quality start, which is 6 innings and giving up 3 or less runs. I mean, a quality start should be something that your pitchers are getting on a regular basis as a team. And it was always such a problem with this team because they run out of pitches. Look how efficient he was. He gives up no runs over 6 innings. He doesn't even issue a walk. He strikes out as many as he gives up hits. And he continues with that incredible whip. I mean, didn't I talk about that? I think he had a 1 last season over 4 games, a 1.00. I think he's at a half 1 right now without looking at it because I think he did 6 innings, gave up 3 hits.
Yeah,
really
and
efficient.
No walks.
Yeah.
Super efficient. I mean, you got to figure if he was a couple more starts into the season, he's coming out for the 7th. And if he has a really efficient 7th, he might come out for the 8th at that point. And when's the last time you could say that about a White Sox starter? We got so used to watching in the 5th inning, Dylan Cease or Lucas Giolito or even Garrett Crochet laboring with pitch counts close to 100 where you're sitting there going, God, I hope we're not applauding them for going 4 2/3.
And they would get applauded.
With 2 guys on base.
And they would get applauded. They would come out at 4 2/3 or 5 1/3, and the broadcasters would be like, what an amazing performance. And you're like, look, the bullpen is destroyed. This is why we keep losing games. That's not an amazing performance. Just because the guy throws really hard and has had a couple of, strikeouts that took 15 pitches. So you're like, well, he won that battle. He's losing the war by throwing so many pitches. Sean Burke, you can call it old school. You can call it Burley-esque if you want to. If you're a White Sox fan, you want to find some sort of comparison. But in reality, he's just a pitcher. Like, that's what they need. They had too many throwers over the last couple of years. They had too many throwers in the first part of this decade when we all of a sudden thought that this rebuild that last rebuild was going to work. Too many throwers, too many hurlers, not enough pitchers. He's a pitcher, and we're lucky to have him. For every disappointment that you get with a Drew Thorpe, having to have Tommy John surgery, these are the things that we've talked about in this show before. Find the guy that isn't hyped, that is developed in your system and pays off. And that's what Sean Burke is. Sean Burke, at this point, he was in the system, and it wasn't just underneath Bannister. But since the Bannister philosophy got in there, Sean Burke has benefited from it, come along in the minor leagues, made it to the majors last year, performed at the back half, and then they were able to identify that even though he was working on some things in spring, he was their best pitcher. They send him out there as the ace, and he goes and performs. And like I said on the last episode, I am so confident in the pitching philosophy and the development of pitchers, and I'm waiting to see something on the hitting side. Now, on the other hand, maybe I could be positive for a few moments on this show. Let's look at opening day.
I think there's reasons to be positive.
Yeah, well, let's look at opening day through the most positive lens possible. What if? We'll play a little what if here.
What if?
What if Chris Getz, who did not like his team, remember that? Remember when he said that publicly?
No,
like this team?
he did not.
Didn't like the effort. Didn't like the defense. And
they weren't gritty. They weren't good defensively.
Didn't like the lack of fundamentals. Brings in a manager who he believes is going to instill his philosophy on the team. And he can't spend any money because of the cheap owner. And so he's like, okay, I have to go through this differently. I have to reorganize what's going on in the front office. I'm going to change everything in the international market or what we're doing in the international market. I'm going to make fundamental structural changes with the money that I have, and because we're not spending a lot, and then I'm going to go try something different. Everybody, remember when Moneyball came out, the idea was to find hitters that got on base and produced runs. And they may not be the flashiest guys, but that's what they did. OPS was huge when Moneyball first came out, and that's what the A's employed, and then the Red Sox did it with a salary, and then everybody went and did it. And that was the thing that everybody went to, and it's still really prevalent, the idea, all the sabermetrics. And maybe Chris Getz in his group came up with the idea of, what if we're just fundamentally sound when we play good defense and we have good pitching? And that's our base. And then if we start winning and we get to a point where we can open up the budget a little bit, then we add the bats at the end. Because the cheapest thing to go get is defense. It's not bats. Because everybody values all the hitting. And that's why Jacob Amaya is at shortstop. And that's why the outfield it doesn't look good when you're thinking about those guys in the lineup, but they can use their glove properly. And the idea will be good pitching, fundamental play, and defense. That isn't going to win a division. That isn't going to get you a wild card, but it is going to make you a better team. It is going to give you hope that maybe they don't lose 100 games this year. You may have a couple of months there at the beginning of this season where they're beating teams, and you're like, wow, maybe I want to go out to the ballpark. Maybe it builds a culture within the place. And you have young bats that are coming up, and Teal and Caro, and you have guys on this team with pop. I mean, Lenny Sosa is everybody's darling now. Ozzie Guillen was telling you, watch out for Lenny Sosa. We were talking about it about 5-6 months ago.
We've been talking about him all offseason, wondering what are they going to do with him because he needs to be on the team.
We had guests come on this show and poo-poo it when I sat there and said, what about Lenny Sosa, what he did in the last couple of months? Oh, I don't think he's in the plans. That we had that. We had guys that covered a team who were like, yeah, I don't know. Where are you going to put him? Well, he hit a home run on opening day.
Yeah, and nice 2-run bomb to really put a capper on it and make Nicky Lopez have to be the next pitcher.
Yes. And so and I think he'll be fine if he's going to be standing over as the regular second baseman, which seems to be the plan. So maybe the whole idea is like, we've got a few guys that got some pop in the bat. We're not going to score 8 runs every game. But if we play good defense, somebody gets a hold of one and sends it out of the ballpark, and we get a nice little bloop like what Vargas got to drive in 2 runs, maybe we win some games 3-2. Maybe we're in games and not getting blown out. Maybe we play a brand of baseball that even though it's going to be under 500, more fans will appreciate. And maybe it builds a base and some positivity in the locker room because these guys are all talking like crazy. They're very excited. They love their manager compared to the one last time. They love the attitude of everything that's going on, and they feel great about themselves. I don't know if they're going to feel that great about it in a couple of months, but right now they feel great and they're riding high. And maybe that's what you're building this year. That's my rosy glasses take coming out of opening day. Now that I've said that, Ed, they're going to lose 9 in a row.
But But is it going to be a competitive 9
with
in a row?
Errors everywhere. With errors everywhere. And the next 5 starters come out and get blown out of the game by the 3rd inning after I've said that, right? Because I'm a White Sox fan and I know. And hosting this show, it seems like everything we talk about, it goes awry, right? Brandon Drury's going to make the team. Breaks his thumb off the team. Like, I thought for a moment after talking about Amaya making the team and doing that entire show, I was getting like direct messages, like DMs, like I'm hearing that he might not make the team. He did make the team. He started, even got a hit. So
yeah, he went 1 for 4.
Right, but I never know what's going to happen the next day with this team. I'm never exactly sure. But through rosy-colored lenses, that could be what we get this year. And if we get that, it'll be fun at the ballpark all year long.
Well, like I said, there's such a thing as a competitive loss, okay? And you can have a competitive loss where your pitchers kept you in the ball game, where you didn't kick the ball around and give it away, okay? And what you saw yesterday for the White Sox was something that they haven't had a whole lot of, which was luck. I mean, that Amaya pop-up that ends up being a 2-run double that puts them up 3-0.
No, I think that was Vargas. Vargas does that.
Or, I'm sorry, Vargas. Yeah, you're right. Amaya was on base for it,
yes.
which was the amazing part of Amaya. And
like half the fans are like, "Who's this guy running around the bases? What's his name?"
Yeah,
I've never seen him out there before.
No, but there he is, getting a single, getting on, and then scoring on Vargas's bloop double, where 4 Angels are converging. And of those 4 Angels, I knew Tim Anderson wasn't going to catch it because it was a pop-up.
And he's terrible at defense, and it was over his head.
And he's never been good at that particular thing. But watching that and watching Yusei Kikuchi put his hands on his head like, oh, no.
Yeah, he knew.
You could just see him. He knew.
It's the Angels. Look, the Angels are bad.
They're a bad team, too.
The White Sox did take advantage of a very bad team when they were out there. Sox in the Basement listeners, for exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest with no high-pressure sales. You go to them instead of them tracking mud into your house and showing you some dingy example windows. See everything right there, every possible add-on, every option for your home. There's an owner in the showroom to answer questions. There's one on site to make sure it's done right. They use all of their own installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it that way for over 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. All major brands custom made, no stock items for a perfect fit. They are a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland. It's 6280 159th Street. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. Speaking of Tim Anderson, of course he gets interviewed.
Of course he does.
Because he's home.
I mean, this is his triumphant return as an opponent because...
And he got applause. And I would have applauded
him. Yeah, he did. And sure, I applauded. I was standing watching it on TV, and I stood there and I applauded for a second.
Yeah. I mean,
as far as anybody knows.
He was a heck of a player for us for a couple of years.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, except I don't like his quote that he gives to the press. He gives a lot of them. And maybe I'm nitpicking here. But in the pregame, when asked why things didn't work out for the White Sox, he says, quote, and I'm getting this off the Sports Illustrated article that I found online. This is his quote. "It takes 9 to win. I was only one of them. I know I did what I had to do to try to win ball games. I don't pitch, So I played shortstop every day and came to the ballpark ready to play. I'm happy with the way I went about it." Now listen, Tim Anderson had some amazing moments with this team out in that cornfield. That was magic. He was a great hitter for a couple of years. He's also a guy that we've talked to at length on this show that when personal problems are happening with him, his play seems to get really, really bad and his head's not in the game. And I think that a guy in his first full season with a team where he played 123 games and had 524 plate appearances for 493 official at-bats, collected a negative 1.8 B-WAR with a 245 average and a 582 OPS. His OPS plus, where 100 is league average, was 62. He hit 1 home run and struck out 122 times to 26 walks and played terrible defense. I don't think a guy who left on a season like that gets to say it takes 9 to win and I was only one of them, as he said, and blame the pitching. I don't think you get to do that. I'm sorry. Now, I know there are people that have his jerseys, and there's people who love him. And there are people who get very angry when you say something about Tim Anderson. I'm sorry, but just any player who does that and comes back and says that is way out of line. Any guy that couldn't get a major league offer to come to spring training and had to play himself onto a team who's been an NRI since he left this team, who failed at another team before he got to the Angels, doesn't get to act like he was a superstar and he hasn't been a problem the last couple of years in his career. It's somebody else, and point the blame at somebody else. That's awful. He should not be doing that, and he's wrong because he was part of the problem as well. He called himself a team leader and he disappeared because he had personal problems in his life that he created. You understand? He created the personal problems in his life that became public because the girl he was with decided to post it all on Instagram. He made actual life choices that caused drama, and then he started playing badly, and then he was off the team. You don't get to do all that and come on and say it takes 9 to win. I was only one of them. I don't pitch. That's absurd. And it should be called out more. If we're the only ones that do it, fine. Yeah. But that should be called out more. I don't want to hear what you have to say, Timmy, because you let me down as much as many of the other players on that team let me down when I thought we were going to be a good team. You are just as responsible. In fact, you're one of the people at the top of the list for me who didn't perform when I needed them and let me down as a fan and let the team down. You should not be doing that. And that's why he's not on the team. That quote is why Chris Getz wouldn't even bring him back as a non-roster invitee when he couldn't find a contract after they let him go. And everybody was like, oh, are they going to bring him back? And Getz was like, not only am I not going to bring him back, but when every other team rejects him, I'm not bringing him back. And I don't even have a shortstop. I'd rather have Jacob Amaya or whatever else he's thrown out there in the last year and a half, rather than Tim Anderson. That's why Chris Getz didn't want him back on the team.
Yeah, Tim Anderson couldn't make the Marlins last year. I mean, he made some appearances for him, but he couldn't stick around. And that's the Marlins. They were awful last year. They were not a good team. And, Tim Anderson talks about the pitching. Well, lest we forget that the last couple of years as a member of the White Sox, Tim Anderson's defense was abysmal. I mean, he was negative runs that he was worth.
His value was his hitting.
Yeah.
It was always his hitting, even when he wins a batting title. His wins above replacement were like a higher number because of his hitting, and then you had to subtract wins that he was worth because of his defense. He was a subpar defensive shortstop who could not go behind the third baseman if his life depended on it. His range did not get him there. And like you said at the beginning of the show, pop up over his head, you knew it was going to fall because it was TA.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm watching. I can see TA's back, which means that either Joe Adell has to get there for the Angels, or the second baseman has to get there. He was in the picture, too. And their center fielder has to get there. They were all in the picture, but it was like, nah, it's just, unless one of the outfielders catches that, it's not going to be TA. I know that. And I think TA is the one that ended up swan diving at the end anyway. But his WAR, his B WAR, in 2022, when he is, an all-star.
And he hit 301, right? He hit 301 in 2022. Yeah, he hits 301, and his B WAR was only 1.3 because the defense brings him down.
Because the defense is so bad.
That's
and
why.
Then like you said, in his last season when he's only hitting 245, he's got that 582 OPS. His B WAR is negative 1.8 because, again, his defense was just horrible. So save your pitchers, Timmy. I mean, that's the thing that, getting back to what you said about the rosy-colored glasses and the idea of having to suffer through Jacob Amaya bats, but understanding that, making plays look routine behind a Sean Burke, making plays look routine behind Davis Martin and Martin Perez and Shane Smith, and you got young guys and even veterans. The one thing that struck me as I'm watching them yesterday is that, yeah, they all look pretty sure-handed. Even Miguel Vargas is not a real great third baseman, but if the pitching is good enough to give them routine plays and they can make it, the only real difficult play I saw was Michael Taylor on opening day has one that he leaps up, catches it. It wasn't nowhere near the wall, but Andrew Benintendi might have let that go over his head. Eloy Jimenez would have lost a limb at making the attempt. But Taylor comes down with it because he's a good defensive outfielder. He loses his footing. It saves runs at that moment, and that was it. That was the one time that they were really in trouble with a batted ball. But everything else, if the pitchers are good enough to give you routine plays and you can make them, guess what? The team can actually compete. But if you have a shortstop, and this is what Anderson's shortcoming was, he had to make up for it with the bat because he would bobble routine plays. He would take a play where it's like, the play where you're kind of in between. Do I go to first? Do I go home? Where do I go with it? If he had a charge in on a ball, we'd see him boot those. We'd see him throw them away. There will be something refreshing about sitting there saying, whether it's Jacob Amaya, whether it's Brooks Baldwin, who we've talked about being a competent shortstop, whether it's Colson Montgomery, if he ever gets his act together and comes up and shows that he's a competent shortstop, making routine plays is a good start, okay? Having an efficient pitcher on the mound who is not afraid of contact, who is not sitting there running up to 100 pitches after 4 2/3 and getting himself into trouble because he's gassed and the slider's not sharp or the curveball's not sharp or the fastball can't be controlled at all, that's a problem. If you have a team that is ready to go, Burke worked quickly yesterday too, and that was, kind of Burley-like. He was ready to go. Corey Lee had the numbers down. Burke was ready to fire. And I know the pitch clock comes into that play there too, but you have the opportunity, if you play just basic fundamental baseball, to get yourself in games, which is all that counts.
Tim doesn't fit the things that I said at the beginning about if I look through this
at all.
Rosy-colored glasses. And then I didn't even talk about locker room stuff and stress, and we had talked about that when he was in there, whether or not some of the stuff going on with him and the way he was performing may have had an influence. And when I see a quote like that, if he said that to the press, I bet you he said that in the locker room before. That's just my guess. I don't know for sure. But I mean, a guy who sits there and says,
that feels like something he might
pitchers. I'm doing the best I can when you're in negative WAR. I mean, yeah, come on, man. That's like a lack of self-awareness. That music indicates the Sox nerd Dave Marin, who puts all those tidbits and trivia nuggets up on the scoreboard, is ready to bring you some right here on Sox in the Basement, as he does each and every week. Brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore, and see everything they have going on. And check out the new Lamont Unlocked podcast with yours truly. I have a co-host now who has a very bubbly personality and brings me a coffee every time. She's like think about all the time you knew me, Ed, when I was doing radio. She may be my favorite co-host ever. Nothing against those that I heard. She is so much fun, and she's never done it before. If anything, you should check out the show just for Tess and see it all at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Opening day was fantastic. So let's savor it, shall we? And why not? This was the first feel-good win the Sox have had in a while. Hopefully there are many more of these in the future because we deserve them, don't we? Anyway, here are some nuggets from Thursday's opener. Will Venable won his managerial debut. He is the first Sox skipper to do that on opening day at home since player manager Lou Fonseca won his first game in 1932 at Comiskey Park. I don't know if this should be considered a good harbinger or not, since that 1932 team lost 102 games. However, if these Sox lose 102 games, that would be a 19-win improvement over last season. Other managers winning their debut on Sox opening day, home or away, are Pedro Gaffal, Jerry Manuel, Gene Lamont, Paul Richards, Billy Sullivan, Fielder Jones, Nixie Callahan, and Clark Griffith. Venable oversaw an 8-1 win over the Angels in his premiere. The 8 runs were the most by the Sox in a season starter since a 14-7 trouncing at Kansas City in the Matt Davidson game. The last time the Sox scored more than 8 in an opener at home was in 2006 when the defending champs walloped CC Sabathia and Cleveland 10-4 on the night the championship banner was unveiled at then-named U.S. Cellular Field. The only time the Sox won an opening day game by more than 7 at home was in 1902 with a 12-2 win over Detroit. Sean Burke was phenomenal, wasn't he? Believe it or not, he became the first Sox righty starter to win on opening day at home since Orville Grove beat Cleveland in 1944. Just to show you how times have changed, of the 10 righties who have won opening day starts at home for the Sox, Burke is the only one who did not reach the 9th inning. He did twirl 6 shutout innings, which is a rare feat in a Sox opener. The University of Maryland product is only the 13th Sox starter to post at least 6 zeros in a first game, and he is the only rookie to do it. The 3 homers the Sox hit Thursday are tied for the second most in an opener and the most they ever hit in an opener at home. And one more. Miguel Vargas hit leadoff in the opener. He was the first Sox third baseman to do that since Don Buford in 1966. Before I get to my zinger, I remind you that gems like these and long-form pieces are on my blog, which you can link to at soxinthebasement.com. My zinger, in honor of the 20th anniversary of the World Champions, I'm going to zing frequently about that team, throwing out some gems you may not know about the 2005 Sox. The 2005 Sox won their opener 1-0. They won the first game of the second half 1-0, and they won the clinching game of the World Series 1-0. That's it, Chris. Probably more than you wanted to know about managers, big wins on opening day, and Miguel Vargas.
So right before the White Sox took the field, on opening day, they made 10 roster moves. Mike Clevenger, Travis Jankowski, Nick Maton, all added into the 26 or the 40-man roster so they could make the team. So their contracts had to be selected. They placed a couple guys on the 10-day injured list: Brian Ramos, Josh Rojas, Mike Talkman, and they put on the 15-day list Tyler Gilbert, and then they put on the 60-day list, which opens up a spot on the 40-man, Drew Thorpe for the Tommy John surgery. So that means with 3 guys being added on, Thorpe coming off, you have to DFA 2 guys. 2 players let out into the ether at the last minute as other teams are finalizing their roster. So you're hoping you can squeeze them into your minor leagues and nobody will claim them. But these 2 guys are now suddenly available. If claimed, the White Sox lose them. And the names are so interesting to me because they say so much about Chris Getz in the front office. And I had somebody reach out almost immediately through one of our social media accounts, a listener, and said, I love this. This is just what you guys talk about on the show. A general manager who is cutthroat and doesn't care why the guy was on the team or what he invested into him. Or is it a trade that didn't work out? Or how will this look? If you're not good enough, you're gone. Dominic Fletcher, I think he may be the first acquisition that Getz had as a general manager, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe not.
Right around there.
Right around there.
That might have been right after the Bummer trade, but yeah.
You gave up a nice prospect for Dominic Fletcher, and you believed he was going to be the answer in the outfield because Arizona had a crowded outfield and no room for him. And he showed up and could not take the opportunity. And instead of sitting around and saying, well, we're going to give him another chance, and we're going to give him another chance, and we're going to give him another chance because I look stupid if I DFA him, he DFA'd Dominic Fletcher. And the other one, which I'm sorry I chuckled, because the amount of grief we took on this show for saying that the Jake Burger trade was an awful trade and that Jake Eater was not a good enough return for him. To watch Jake Burger flourish and continue to be a viable major league hitter, and the return, which was Jake Eater, get DFA'd on opening day. That is, you can add that to the list of failures that Kenny Williams had post 2005, because that was his move. And all reports are that he called up and offered Burger to get him. Like, he ran that trade, not Hahn. And Jake Eater now DFA'd, a guy that they had given to them, a guy that DFAing him makes the organization look stupid, even though it wasn't their guy. And Chris Getz was like, yeah, this isn't the guy. We're DFAing him. There are other guys on this 40-man more valuable than him. So Jake Eater and Dominic Fletcher DFA'd. Again, cutthroat. Even if it doesn't look good, even if you can criticize the moves. And Eater, you just get to criticize Kenny Williams. And then development, maybe. Like, hey, this guy was a prospect. We couldn't do anything with him. Fletcher is somebody that he directly brought in. Gave up a prospect for it that a lot of people liked. And within a year, Fletcher is DFA'd as well. But that was the big news buried on opening day. Most people were in the parking lot tailgating when that happened. That's a buried story, but something of note, Ed.
Oh, yeah. And Jake Eater, let's not mistake anything. This is a guy whose minor league numbers up to this point include a 1.468 whip, which is bad, and an ERA of 5.54, which is bad. And he's not particularly good at striking guys out. I mean, 11.1 strikeouts per 9 is lovely, but his walks per 9 is 4.6, which means his ratios are bad. So he was a prospect that got hurt, and Kenny Williams traded for him mainly because he just didn't like Jake Burger, who, by the way, was his own draft pick, which never made sense to me. And you're right, Burger goes out there. He has a good run with Miami. He's now a key part of the Texas Rangers lineup, and they're only competing for, the AL West and potential return to the World Series this year. So Jake Eder going away makes a lot of sense because he hasn't done anything to show you that he is going to be a viable major league pitcher, let alone a member of this rotation, let alone somebody that you want to rely on for anything.
Listen, Jake Eder was brought in because
Fletcher just...
Well, go ahead. Finish your thought on Fletcher. I'm sorry.
And then Dominic Fletcher just never panned out.
He was no good.
He looked really good as a member of the Diamondbacks, and when he got here, something went wrong.
Listen,
it's hard to say.
Jake Eder was added onto this team mainly because he was just looking for a return to get rid of Jake Berger. That's my opinion. I don't have anything to back up on the thing, but he just wanted to get rid of him. And you know, I look at it from the perspective of this show and my interaction with the few players that I've been able to get on the show. Like Liam Hendricks came on this show because they were in the middle of a strike or a lockout or whatever the hell that was, the last work stoppage. And he was the guy who's the union rep, and he had a lot of experience. And we get denied people all the time by the team. Because as I've been told by people inside the team, there are people who really didn't like some of the things that we've said about them. It's true, but they don't like it being said. And he went on during that time period because he wasn't required to get permission from the team because they weren't allowed to have contact. And that's how Liam Hendricks ended up on the show. It wasn't because of the team. It was actually because the team couldn't tell him no. And it was the same thing with Jake Berger. And remember, his wife, lovely lady, was really into and talked about on the show the idea of building his brand and doing things on social media and being very open. And that's against what the White Sox like to do. And so it's not, Berger wasn't traded because he came on Sox in the Basement. I'm not saying that. But the Bergers kind of did their own thing. And it was outside of what the Sox normally do. And we heard that from them. Like this idea of like they were ready to go back to AAA at any time, no matter how he was performing, because there was a feeling that it didn't matter what he was doing. And so I really feel there was something else there. It wasn't performance, where Kenny Williams had a bug up his butt and wanted to get rid of Jake Berger. When he got rid of Jake Berger, he was taking anything. And he was like, this guy on paper looks good. That'll be good enough. And that's why Jake Eder has now already been released. He's DFA'd. And there were a lot of people tried to...
Kenny Williams made a bad trade.
Made a bad trade and did it intentionally, I believe. I believe Kenny Williams did it intentionally, made a bad trade. And again, I'm not saying it's because he came on my show. I'm not saying that. I don't think I'm that important. But he did do a lot of things that were outside of what the rest of the players do. And the team probably didn't like it. Somewhere in there, somebody didn't like what Jake Berger was doing. And you know what? Meanwhile, Jake Berger's living his best life and doing well. So boo on the White Sox, the former front office. They lost that battle, right? They're like an old program. Yeah. I had an old program director who like didn't like me, and I said, "Yeah, I'm leaving." And you know what? That whole radio station had a changed format like in a year and a half, and I was doing fine, living my life. And when you look back on it, you go, "Okay, I'm not there anymore, but I'm doing good." Oh, you guys, it didn't work out for you, did it? And it's the same thing. That's how the Bergers should look at it too. Didn't work out for you guys. They have burger days now, like in the town that I'm at, and I'm featured there, so I'm doing great. And so, but I mean, that's the thing. When I see the Eder thing, that's like the end of a little dramatic story connected to Jake Berger, and Eder didn't pan out. No matter how many prospect heads wanted to tell me that it was a good trade. We knew it, Ed. We said it. I don't think this is a good deal. I don't think you got enough back. It was proven on opening day.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.